I'm going to ask Rachel to come in now, and Rachel's going to speak about what I think comes in very strong with Jasmine's, because Jasmine's was about the slapdash process and how the adults really didn't, the informed consent model didn't work. And you want to specifically talk about, am I right, the health outcomes of transitioning. So do you want to just take the floor and I'll ask you questions as and when they come?
Absolutely. And if I get too passionate, I apologize. It's something that's very important to me. It's impacted me very personally. But I see transition as medically assisted self-harm. I think that what's going on is medical malpractice. And on the note of suing, here in the States, the laws in each state are different. And so it's really complex for us to come out of this with medical conditions and health problems and be able to sue. We're not usually able to sue because what's called the statute of limitations has passed. So there's too much time that's gone from when we started to when we're seeing these medical conditions pop up. And that's been my case. So I've had a lot of medical complications happen as a result of transitioning. I was on testosterone for about 6 years. And during that time, I ended up walking with a cane. And I ended up at the very end there having renal failure, which is actually what led me to detransition in the first place.
And when you were walking with a cane, how did you get from walking to walking with a cane? And did you think this is testosterone?
I didn't at the time. Testosterone in women can affect our bone density. And I have a congenital hip condition. So my hips were already fragile going into this. And then to add bone density loss onto it, I ended up falling and having several different fractures just from falling on the ground. And so I ended up walking with a cane because my hip bone was so fragile because of that.
And I've seen quite a few people, to the point that I've actually seen some kind of really groovy, for want of a better word, canes, like blue canes, and and it's like it's become part of the kind of the trans world is the cane.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so sad, honestly, to see so many women who, I mean, I know so many women who've transitioned who are still taking testosterone and are having health complications. And, doctors will not say, this is due to testosterone use. You need to stop. You're hurting yourself.
And did any doctor say it before we go to the renal failure? Did any doctor say it about the cane? Because
No.
it's well established, testosterone and osteoporosis and weak bones.
Yeah, no, they said, oh, well, it's kind of come out of nowhere, but maybe it's just because of your birth defects, with my hips that's happening. But they really didn't link the two together.
And then you had renal failure. What does that mean, and how did it come about?
So I had I had the beginning stages of kidney and liver failure. I was jaundiced. I was urinating blood. I had extreme back pain and was having trouble walking, vomiting all the time. It was really hellish.
And did somebody say testosterone might be the problem, or?
Yeah, so fortunately, I was seeing a different doctor than the initial doctor that I had seen, who was very, very adamant about, you need testosterone, you need surgeries. But I saw a different doctor, and fortunately, she just kind of couldn't be bothered with doing tests and things like that. So she said, well, the only prescription you're on right now is the testosterone. Maybe you should stop taking that or wean off of it and see if that helps with the renal failure. And I went from the injectable testosterone to the gel testosterone for about a week or two, and noticed that my symptoms were improving. And then I just stopped the gel and I stopped testosterone completely.
And did you tell me that you got pushback from the trans community for going from the injections to the gel. They thought you were weakening your transness or something.
Yeah. So the reaction to me just stopping testosterone was incredibly aggressive. I had people saying, you're a traitor, you were never trans, you're just a cis, and all this stuff. And the whole time I'm like, this is my health, and at the time I wasn't really considering detransition. I didn't know what that was. I didn't think, maybe this was all wrong. At the time, I really was just prioritizing my health.
Yeah. And the kind of, you go on an arc, and I have to say, so many people I know who have detransitioned for their health, and then later psychologically detransitioned, if you follow me. Health came first. Literally, testosterone is vicious to the female body. So you had a kind of, after you stopped testosterone, quite a few different things happened. So do you want to tell people, it gets better by the end, but it's very dark for a little while.
It does get dark. So after I stopped testosterone, I ended up having 3 mini strokes, which they're called transiemic attacks, TIAs. They are very similar to a full stroke, except that the blood clot essentially dissipates. So I had neurological damage from that I still kind of deal with. And my left side of my body just went numb and limp, and I couldn't talk. It was very scary. I had 3 of those, and they could not give me a solid answer as to why. I know now that that's a side effect of testosterone, and that is well established by endocrinologists, that high levels of testosterone use by females raises your risk of heart attack, heart disease, stroke. These things are very real, and they're not discussed when you're first going in and talking about, hey, I want to start testosterone. That's not a warning they give people.
And then, am I right in thinking you had endometriosis? Like the strokes were bad enough, but it got worse.
It got worse. Yeah, I ended up diagnosed with endometriosis, and initially, to treat the endometriosis, one doctor actually put me on Lupron, which here in the United States is used as a puberty blocker. And the Lupron destroyed my body. I was bedridden. I couldn't walk. My hair fell out. I have permanent memory loss from it. And after that one dose, I researched it because I didn't know what it was. And I was put in a position of, do this or you're going to continue to be in pain and suffer. And it was very reminiscent of the situation I was in when I first transitioned, of you're going to continue to suffer and possibly die if you don't do this treatment right now, right away. And this is the only answer. And so I was in that situation again with the Lupron. But upon researching it, I was like, why are they putting this poison in people? So I stopped taking that. Eventually, I saw a surgeon who was fantastic. She's a specialist here in the United States. She's one of the best doctors for endometriosis. And I was very lucky to get in to see her. She performed 2 surgeries, the first of which was to cut out the diseased tissue. The second surgery, unfortunately, the disease spread to my uterus. And by the time it spread, she told me, your uterus is just covered in this disease. We got to take it out. It's going to keep spreading to your other organs. So I opted to have a hysterectomy. And what a lot of people don't realize about hysterectomy is it is a major surgery. I remember from my trans days, all the trans identified women that I knew wanted a hysterectomy. They were just pushing for it, gunning for it. And it's very traumatic to heal from. And it can raise your risk of cancers. You can have complications. I ended up having like infections and bacterial infections. And also testosterone causes vaginal and muscular atrophy in your reproductive area. that's not really taken into account. So you have someone who's been on testosterone for 5-6 years, you give them a hysterectomy, that also adds to atrophy. So I ended up with prolapses, where it got to a point where, to be perfectly crude, my insides became my outsides. I ended up hospitalized because they saw parts of me that were coming out of my vagina.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And from what you told me, the 2 years after stopping testosterone were really wickedly vicious on you. And then it reduced, the awfulness kind of started to stop. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I was very fortunate that my renal failure, after I stopped the testosterone, I got on a different diet, and I was taking better care of myself. That's subsided, and then the endometriosis, I was treated for that with those surgeries. That hasn't come back yet. There's still always a chance that it might come back, but I've been out of it for 3 years and no signs yet. And I've been to physical therapy, and that has helped me with the atrophy some. And so things are getting better, but the outcome of coming off of testosterone, I really wish that I had had a medical team who was educated, who was honest, and who was prepared to guide me through the physical turmoil that I would go through.
Oh my God. I think there's a huge, from what we learned when we opened Beyond Trans as a part of the GenSpec service, we realized there's so many questions, people who've been impacted by medical transition, that there were no answers, if you follow me. So all these questions, and nobody knows the answer, and they say we're waiting for the research, we do not know. So it's literally experimental. It
It
really,
is.
yeah.
And it really makes me angry that we are giving this drug out so easily to vulnerable people, people who are desperate, and we're telling them, this is what's going to fix you. This is the only thing that's going to fix you. You're going to die if you don't have this drug. When it's experimental, there are warnings on these drugs saying, don't give this to women. And yet we're giving it to women. It makes no sense. And we have no regulation of it. There's no standard dosage. There's no, let's test, for this or that or the other. There's no even conception of taking into account people's past medical history. I was forthright with telling my doctor, this is my medical history. And still, I have these hip issues, and they gave me something that's going to cause bone density loss. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I would like to ask you, there was something you said about basically when you medically transitioned, there was a kind of a period of very difficult times, and then it receded. And now, do you think, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but do you think it's more on an even plane now?
I'm relatively stable now. Due to both testosterone use and the hysterectomy, my ovaries ended up failing. So I'm on supplemental estrogen now. To be frank, it has affected my sex life pretty dramatically. It has had permanent damage, but I am in a place where I understand enough about my body and my own history to be able to advocate for the things that I need. It does frustrate me that I can't seem to find doctors who are willing and competent enough to monitor me for various risks. So, if I were to have another mini stroke or a full stroke, I know that if I go in and I say testosterone caused this, they would say, no, it didn't. And that frustrates me a lot. But I do take very good care of myself now. So that's been very helpful. And like I said, I know a lot more about my body now, which is great.
Yeah, you've been to the bottom and you've come back up.
Yeah.
Wow, what a story. What a story, Rachel. Thank you very much. You're going to stay on now, and Sylvia is going to come up, because both of you had two very different experiences, therapeutic experiences. And I thought it would be interesting to compare and contrast. Am I right in thinking, before we go over to Sylvia, you had an affirmative experience? Just give us a little bit about that, and then we'll hear what Sylvia had, if you follow me.
Yeah. So my gender therapist was all about affirmation. She was ironically a lesbian, and she told me repeatedly that I wasn't a lesbian. I was definitely a man in a woman's body. And I have a history of mental illness, which I was transparent with her about. I have a history of sexual trauma, which I, again, was transparent about. But all of that she took to mean, oh, well, that's because you're trans, or this is all leading up to you being trans. It was never addressed on its own. It always had this sort of link to me being trans. So she really pushed me towards that. And I even at one point expressed my doubts to her a few months in, and she said, oh, that's normal. You just have to push through it. So even when I expressed doubts, she was saying, no, you're still trans.
Yeah. And Sylvia, in comparison, what was your experience of because I'm thinking basically about therapeutic. For me, conventional psychotherapy would explore everything. The affirmative model is very narrow, and it says you're trans. Like Sasha, I add, my lovely podcast co-host, says you're a walking gender identity. And we like in the round, we like to see the full person. So tell us, Sylvia, what was your experience?
Well, first, I'd like to say that I always say that if I'd had a different therapist, or if I'd had a different experience with therapy, I would be in a very different position. I started experiencing severe dysphoria at around 19. Yeah, 18, 19. But I didn't, that's how I understood it to be, was gender dysphoria. But I had this therapist who I had been with since I was 4 years old, which sounds like a long time, because it is. But I started going to her when my parents got divorced, and I would meet with her and do play therapy. And then around 10 or 12, I think I said, can we stop playing? Can I just talk? And so we went into the other room, and I would draw for her or talk to her. So this woman had been with me literally my whole life. She knew all of my life experiences. She knew my family history. She knew about my sexual orientation and how much I struggled with it. To be honest, I would say she probably knows me better than I know myself. And her goal was always to make me, or to guide me into self-love and self-acceptance as I am. Right. So when I was self-harming because I was a lesbian, at the time I was saying I was bisexual because I was determined, she was trying to help me, as she puts it, untangle the trauma that's informing my sense of self and my worldview. Because if this finger's trauma, it's like warping me and making me think things and do things that are not naturally to who I really am, right? My true self, as it were. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to college, and I start experiencing what is classified as, gender dysphoria. I had nightly visions of graphic detail of me cutting off body parts, my breasts. I had crippling anxiety at being perceived as a woman. And I call my therapist, who I hadn't spoken to. We speak like once a month as a sort of a touch base. And so I'm in college, and I call her and I tell her, hey, I'm having these visions. I'm having these dreams of cutting off body parts, and of, I'm not able to leave my dorm. And she said, well, let's talk about what's happened in the past few months. Like, have we missed anything? And when I told her I identify as genderqueer, I'm not sure that she understood what I meant, but I trusted that she supported me. She neither affirmed nor denied what I was saying. She just said, oh, okay, noted. Let's go back to wanting to cut off body parts and how that is giving you a peace of mind. And for her, I think her understanding of knowing my history with internalized homophobia, knowing my history of, assault and whatnot, was able to see these symptoms were from other comorbidities. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
But she never said, you're not trans, you're not this. She just said, well, let's talk about this experience that you had. Let's explore how that made you feel. Where in your body do you feel it? She really always had me going back to being in my body. And it's really because of her, since the age of 4 until I was at that time 19, had always been about accepting myself as I am. So because I had that sort of mindset, I knew that getting a surgery was not something that I wanted, because I did not view that as self-love. And as far as HRT goes, I come from a family of doctors, and I was made aware of the negative side effects that hormones could have on my body, but also just the lack of research that there was. And so I was given a very special set of cards, but this therapist,
it does occur to me, and I'm going to ask Rachel what was her experience in comparison, but it does occur to me, Sylvia, that had your therapist not known you since you were 4, might she have been afraid to have this conventional exploratory therapy, because so many therapists won't touch this subject because they're afraid of it?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think I haven't asked her recently, but it's my understanding that now she could lose her license or get fired from where she works now if a teen comes to her and says, hey, I'm this. She has to affirm it. And if I, like I said, at different times, she would have,
Extraordinary. And what was yours in comparison, Rachel? What was your experience?
Well, like I said, my gender therapist was extremely into affirmation, very much pushing me towards transition. And I want to say too, I've been to therapy since detransitioning, and I've seen 3 different therapists, and each one of them has pushed for me to retransition. I had one therapist actually call me a TERF because I was saying, I don't want to talk about this. It causes me trauma to talk about it. I don't feel comfortable talking about it with you right now. And he started to get me to open up about it a little. And I said, these are the problems within the community that I've experienced. And he said, well, that sounds very turfy of you. And I said, this is why I didn't want to talk about it. I feel
that's deeply inappropriate.
Oh yeah.
Well,
needless to say, I fired him, but
wow.
But it's really frustrating that detransitioners, we have, I look at transitioning, for me at least, as a trauma. It was really devastating. It's impacted my life in so many ways, and I can't talk about it in therapy without a therapist saying, oh, well, you're wrong, your views are bigoted, and you should actually retransition. It's ridiculous.
Okay, on behalf of my industry, I yet again apologize. It's awful. It's awful. It's just awful. It's inappropriate. This is not in the training. In the training, we're open and gentle and exploratory, and we don't call people any names, let alone TERFs, let alone detransition. Oh, where do I start? What we'll do